All right, as we can continue our coverage live, we're in Vietnam, where earlier today the president wrapped up his summit, his second summit with North Korea's Kim Jong-un. Following the summit, we exclusively had the opportunity to speak with the president before he departed Vietnam. Here's part one of that interview. Mr. President, great to see you.
Thank you very much.
Summit number 2, when I heard Kim Jong-un say, was asked the question, are you ready to denuclearize? His answer was, I wouldn't be here. Otherwise, I wouldn't be here. And then he goes on, and you said that might be the best answer you've ever heard.
Well, and we're working towards something, but we didn't sign anything today. It didn't quite work out. I would say that I wasn't satisfied, and perhaps he wasn't satisfied. Good relationship, but I decided that this wasn't the right time to sign something. So we'll see what happens over a period of time.
It's funny, it came up on the radio show. We've known each other well over 2 decades.
Yeah.
The art of the deal. One of the key components in the book is you say you've always got to be able to walk up to the last second.
Yeah. You always
Reagan, Reykjavik.
Well, whether it's Reagan, whether it's anybody, I mean, you have to be prepared to walk, and this just wouldn't have been good for our country. And frankly, he can look at it the same way. Maybe he can look at it the same way. But we get along really well. He's a different kind of a guy, and I just said, look, this isn't going to be working. So I have a feeling something down the line will happen, and it'll happen. It'll be good. But
and
this just wasn't
your choice. You said this isn't the deal.
Well, let's go with both. Let's go with both. I don't want to say it was my choice. It was something that he wanted to do, and I didn't want to do it. And I just don't think it would have been good, maybe for either of us. But we'll get something worked out eventually.
Can you give us any insight into where maybe the sticking point was?
Well, they wanted to denuke certain areas, and I wanted everything. And the sanctions are there, and I didn't want to give up the sanctions unless we had a real program. And they're not ready for that, and I understand that fully. I really do. I mean, they spent a lot of time building it, and that doesn't mean the world has to be happy. But I wanted them to denuke, and they wouldn't do the full. They wanted to do some. And I guess a lot of people would have said that's a great start, but I just didn't feel it was right.
Let me ask you about last night. You said he said something at dinner, and I won't say it. I'll let him say it. Can you bring us into that dinner?
Well, no, I just think he's, first of all, he's a character.
He was laughing about it.
He's a real personality, and he's very smart. He's sharp as you can be, and he's a real leader, and he's pretty mercurial. I don't say that necessarily in a bad way, but he's a pretty mercurial guy. But he was talking to the press a little bit, and, he's not big into talking to the press, but the press came in. Look, bottom line, I think he wants to get something done, but this wasn't the right time. And Vietnam, Hanoi, where we are right now, they have treated us so fantastically, so good. They've done such a great job. They're very proud of the job they've done, and they've really treated us. I mean, it's been an incredible 2.5 days.
You kept saying, and managing expectations, you said, I'm in no rush. No. I want the right deal. And the right deal for you is complete denuclearization that is verified and on-site inspections on demand.
It's a much tougher deal to make. Maybe it won't get made, but that's the deal that we should have. And you can't give up everything if you don't get that. Now, we could have done large portions, but you're not getting that. So we'll see what happens. Again, the relationship is very good. He likes me. I like him. Some people say, oh, you shouldn't like him. I said, why shouldn't I like him? I like him. Get along great. We'll see what happens.
Let me ask you about, let's go back to Singapore, where I had an opportunity to see you there.
Right.
And hostages were released.
Right.
Remains have come home.
Right.
And the interesting and most profound part of it was that no rockets have been fired over Japan.
That's
Guam's
right.
not threatened.
That's right.
And the continental United States was being threatened. Progress in that area?
A lot of progress, and it's a lot of progress not necessarily on paper, although we actually signed a very good agreement. It said no denuclearization. We're going to have a complete denuke. I call it denuking, but it's denuclearization. And it was a document that was signed, and it was a very good document. The fact is that he also said he's not going to do testing, and he said that recently. And he said it again to me just a little while ago. He doesn't want to do testing. He's not going to do that. That's a big thing. No rockets, no anything. And I believe, when he tells me that, I will take him at his word. But we'll see how it all goes. I think we had a very good 2 days, but I just don't think maybe either of us were ready.
Well, the president back in Washington tonight amid bipartisan praise over the last 24 hours for, as you heard, they're walking away from his summit with Kim Jong-un, calling it the art of the no deal. Here to talk about that tonight, Christian Whitten, former senior advisor in the State Department, Fred Fleitz, former deputy assistant to Donald Trump, and David Tafuri, former foreign policy advisor to the Obama campaign. Welcome to all of you.
Thank you. Good to be here.
Okay, so David, what do you make of the White House's response and the way that they are describing what happened here, saying the Obama administration didn't walk away from the Iran deal, which they have absolutely eviscerated and walked away from now, but saying this president knew enough to walk away from something that wasn't going to be good for the U.S.?
I think that's a great talking point by Sarah Sanders. I give her credit for that. I give the president credit for having the courage to walk away. I think it was the right decision for him. But I think we also have to recognize that this summit was a failure. We accomplished nothing from this summit. And unfortunately, we gave Kim Jong-un something, which is he got to sit next to the president. He got a photo op with the president. And it further legitimizes and normalizes Kim Jong-un to be there with the president. And other countries look at that, and there's some symbolism there. And instead of us getting some kind of concession from him, we got nothing. I also disagree with the president when he suggests there might be a third summit. I don't see how he can go into a third summit without getting something first. The first summit was great. It was historic just because they met. But this second summit should have produced something, and without producing something, you can't have a third one.
Okay, so Fred, obviously the supporters of the president, including people who aren't normally supportive of him, say they are praising him for this. They talk about the fact that there has been open dialogue, that the missile testing is stopped. We had some some people who are being held there in North Korea. They've gotten to come back. They're still highlighting the positives and saying the fact that there is ongoing conversation and nobody walked away and there wasn't a missile test today, they're counting that in the positive column.
Well, I think that's right. I talked with the president about the North Korea situation about 10 days ago, and he said that the halt in nuclear testing and missile program is a big step forward. I think he's right. It's setting these programs back. This was an act of exceptional leadership to walk away. I've been involved in a lot of negotiations in my jobs with the CIA and the State Department. There's this temptation to say we achieved something so you can have the signing ceremony and pat yourself on the back. It's really difficult to walk away. There's something else going on here I think we have to think about. Why did Kim think that the president would go along with this bad deal? No one's talking about that. It could be Kim figured, look, we'll corner Mr. Trump. He'll agree to a terrible deal because he traveled all the way over here. But something else is going on. Over the last week on this network, we've heard repeated reports that there were lower-level State Department people who wanted to go too far. And I think they telegraphed to Kim, maybe directly to the government, that the president was more flexible than he really is. And I think that the administration has to look into this and make sure that everybody's on the same page.
Okay, so you're saying that within the Trump administration itself, there may have been a split there about what the White House, the highest levels, the president thought was appropriate versus State Department employees who were there doing some of the laying the groundwork, the foundational work.
I think that's probably right. I mean, you saw the reports this week where high-level officials were concerned that there were people doing the negotiations who might be ready to give way too much. Well, I think the North Koreans heard that.
Okay, Christian, what do you make of that? I mean, this is your area of expertise. You know how this works.
Yeah, I don't know. I think actually the U.S. team was fairly unified. I think it was very clear we were going to walk away if we didn't get much. Shuttering Yongbyon, incidentally, is something the North Koreans sold to us before. They sold that to us in the Bush administration. We got suckered. They charged us $2.5 million for some dynamite to blow up an irrelevant cooling tower, and then restarted Yongbyon. Incidentally, the purpose of Yongbyon, which is what they offered, which is what Kim offered to Trump to shut it down, is to produce plutonium for weapons. And they've already produced enough plutonium for a lot of weapons. So even if Yongbyon goes away tomorrow, it's not much. So it was smart for Trump to walk away. One historical analogy is the Reykjavik summit, where Ronald Reagan was meeting Gorbachev, and they were originally supposed to meet to talk to about eliminating some nuclear weapons. Gorbachev got to the point where he was willing to give up almost all of the Soviet nuclear arsenal if the U.S. gave up its own, but they demanded that Ronald Reagan give up on the idea of missile defense, on the idea that you would actually defend the American people from nuclear attack rather than avenge them. Reagan Reagan said no, he walked away, and it terrified the Soviets. And a year later, we actually got an arms control agreement that eliminated an entire class of weapons in Europe. Walking away from these, I just disagree with the idea that Trump lost this and we didn't get anything. I think Trump did a very good thing with the North Koreans, and also the Chinese took notice about that. They think they can pull a fast one on Trump with this trade deal that's coming together, and today they saw that the president is actually not in it for the photo op, not in it for the political upside, that he'll walk away from bad deals.
Well, David and Fred, what do you think about that? The fact that the president telegraphed strength and the fact that he wasn't going to roll over on this?
Well, I think Christian is right that this could help for any future discussions and negotiations or a summit with China about some of the differences that we have with China. They have to think, okay, well, the president might walk away from us like he did from North Korea. But on the other hand, this is kind of great for China because now China has an excuse also to deal with North Korea. It has an excuse to ease sanctions, to continue to deal.
Which a lot of people would argue it's been doing.
Yeah, it has been doing. It is helping North Korea evade sanctions, and it can do more of that and continue trade with North Korea. And that they were empowered and emboldened to do that by the fact that the president met again with Kim Jong-un in this summit, which got so much attention but really didn't produce anything. The other winner in this is Dan Coats. Remember, he said as the leader of the DNI that he didn't believe that North Korea really intended to give up its nuclear weapons. The president disagreed with him, said he was wrong, but it turns out he was right.
Okay, Christian, I hear you laughing, so I got to give you a chance to respond to that.
Well, yeah. So Dan Coats, who's the head of our $50 billion a year intelligence bureaucracy, says, oh, maybe North Korea doesn't want to give up its weapons, and maybe Russia is bad, and maybe Iran is also bad. I mean, I would be happy to produce that irrelevant assessment for only $25 billion. I'll give him a 50% discount. Dan Coats, the director of national intelligence, both the person and the institution are irrelevant. That is supposed to produce intelligence, which is information we don't have, and make the job of the president and our combatant command easier. And what he did instead was just recycle a bunch of obvious truths. Yes, North Korea would like to hold on to its nukes. Yes, they're going to drive a hard bargain. They beat the Clinton administration. They beat the George W. Bush administration. They're good negotiators. This is obvious. You don't need to pay intelligence bureaucrats $50 billion a year to produce this. But you know what? Donald Trump has done better than those two other administrations.
Right. We got to leave it there. Unfortunately, we're out of time.
Okay.
But this issue is far from settled, as we know. So if you'll all come back, we would love to have you back because Korea is, in this North Korea situation, not done yet. Thank you all.
Thank you.